You think the scariest people are angry, loud, violent, but the most dangerous man you'll ever meet? He's calm, polite, smiling. He never interrupts. He always agrees, and when things go wrong, he quietly disappears, leaving behind a mess he was too nice to confront. This isn't about being rude. This is about being real. Because when you wear the mask of niceness long enough, one of two things happens. You either forget who you are, or you become someone much darker than you intended. And if you stay until the end, I'll show you the one trait that nice guys suppress the most and why it turns them into ticking time bombs. In a world obsessed with approval, being nice has become the most overpraised and least understood trait in modern life. You've been told since childhood, don't make waves, be agreeable, always be the bigger person. But what if that script is broken? What if niceness isn't a virtue, but a performance, a disguise? And worse, what if it's making people weaker, lonelier, and more dangerous than ever before? There's a paradox sitting in the heart of our culture. We reward the appearance of goodness while punishing moral courage. We tell men to be emotionally open but mock them when they're vulnerable. We elevate soft words and suppress hard truths, but the suppressed doesn't disappear. It festers, and the result is something far more sinister than rudeness or rage. It's passive violence. It's repressed resentment. It's the smiling mask of the man who never got to say no. This video isn't about telling you to be mean. It's about why you need to stop being fake. We're diving into the psychology, philosophy, and chilling real-world consequences of a world that has confused being nice with being good, and what happens when we lose the courage to speak the truth. We've confused two very different things, being kind and being nice. Kindness is rooted in truth. It has backbone. It says what needs to be said, even when it's uncomfortable. Niceness, on the other hand, is a costume, a social strategy. It exists not to help others, but to protect the self. It's not moral courage, it's moral camouflage. Why? Because nice people aren't driven by virtue, they're driven by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of disapproval, fear of being called difficult. Niceness is what happens when you replace authenticity with acceptability. You stop asking, is this right? And start asking, will they still like me? Psychologists have a name for this, people-pleasing behavior. And while it might seem harmless on the surface, it carries a deep cost. Over time, you stop saying what you mean. You stop making decisions that reflect who you are, and eventually, you don't just lose your voice, you lose your identity. The philosopher Immanuel Kant believed morality only exists when actions are done from duty, not from desire for reward or avoidance of punishment. In other words, if you're being nice to be liked, you're not being good, you're just being compliant. Let's bring that down from the clouds. Think about workplace culture. Corporations are filled with performative niceness. Endless Slack emojis, hey team messages, and fake smiles at HR meetings. Everyone's nice, but no one tells the truth. Toxic bosses are never challenged. Burnout spreads like wildfire, and the people suffering the most are the ones too nice to speak up. A 2018 study from the Harvard Business Review found that overly agreeable employees are less likely to be promoted to leadership roles. Why? Because people don't trust nice. They trust clarity, assertiveness, integrity. Ironically, being too agreeable makes you seem inauthentic, even weak. And the damage doesn't end in the office. In relationships, niceness can mutate into passive aggression. Someone says it's fine when it's absolutely not. Conflict is avoided until it explodes. Emotional needs are buried beneath a forced smile. And what began as an effort to connect ends in quiet resentment. Here's the truth. Niceness isn't empathy. It's self-preservation. It's emotional theater designed to avoid confrontation. And the longer you keep it up, the more disconnected you become, not just from others, but from yourself. So the next time you feel the urge to be nice, ask yourself, Am I being honest, or am I just afraid? Because here's the danger. When you perform niceness for too long, your real emotions don't disappear. They go underground. And what we bury eventually comes back. The problem with being nice isn't just what you show, it's what you hide. Every time you smile when you're angry, every time you agree when you mean no, every time you swallow your truth just to avoid tension, you feed something hidden, something ancient, something Jung called the shadow. Carl Jung believed that every human being has a dark side, a buried set of impulses, desires, and truths we don't want to acknowledge, not because they're evil, but because they're inconvenient. They challenge the image we want others to see. The shadow holds our rage, our lust, our ambition, our fear, all the parts we were told weren't acceptable growing up. And nice people are masters at pretending those parts don't exist. Here's the trap. The shadow doesn't vanish when ignored. It festers, it waits, and eventually it leaks out, often in destructive and unpredictable ways. That's why people who seem endlessly nice are often the ones who snap without warning, because under that polished surface, they're boiling. The American Psychological Association has found strong links between emotional suppression and long-term mental health issues, including anxiety, aggression, and depression. Repressing feelings doesn't make you virtuous, it makes you volatile, like shaking a bottle of soda and pretending it's calm because the cap is still on. Real-world case studies show this vividly. Think of Jeffrey Dahmer, a soft-spoken man described by neighbors as quiet, respectful, even gentle. Or Ed Kemper, the code killer, known for being intelligent, polite, and eerily likable. These men were not foaming at the mouth. They were nice until they weren't. Now, I'm not saying every nice guy is a serial killer, but I am saying that the unexamined shadow can become a danger, not just to others, but to yourself. Because when your life is built on approval, you're constantly denying the parts of you that don't fit the script. The frustration grows, the loneliness intensifies, and one day you lash out at your partner, your coworker, or even yourself. That outburst you think came out of nowhere? It didn't. It came from all the yeses you said when you meant no. It came from the part of you that's been screaming behind the mask for years. You don't need to fear your shadow, but you do need to meet it, because until you do, someone else will. On their terms, not yours. Being good isn't about being nice, it's about being whole, and wholeness requires integrating the darkness, not denying it. If you're a man in today's world, you've probably felt the message loud and clear. Be softer, be sensitive, be nice. But what no one tells you is that this script comes with a trap, because while you're being taught to open up, you're also being punished the moment you stop performing. Modern masculinity has been fractured. On one hand, men are expected to be emotionally available, gentle, and empathetic. On the other, they're quietly ridiculed when they cry too often, assert themselves too boldly, or express their sexual or competitive drives too freely. The result? Millions of men stuck in limbo, trying to be nice enough to be accepted, but strong enough to be respected, and often failing at both. What starts as a social adjustment quickly becomes psychological exile. You're not allowed to express dominance, fear, or desire without being labeled aggressive or toxic. So you adapt, you shrink, you mask, you start to believe that being nice is the safest way forward. Until you realize it's not a path, it's a cage. Philosopher Simone de Beauvoir spoke of the othering of identities, how society constructs roles not based on who you are, but how others need you to behave. For men, niceness has become the new suit of armor, but unlike iron, it's made of glass. It looks polished, but it shatters under pressure. And the cracks are showing. A 2021 Pew Research study revealed that young men are increasingly reporting feelings of loneliness, emotional numbness, and identity confusion. even though they are more emotionally expressive than generations past. Why? Because expression without direction is just exposure. When men reveal vulnerability without the structure of self-worth, they don't get supported, they get dismissed. One of the most tragic modern archetypes is the nice guy. He's everywhere. On Reddit, TikTok, dating apps, he listens, he compliments, he says all the right things. But underneath, he's seething. Because he's been told that if he plays the nice script perfectly, he'll be loved. What he wasn't told is that authentic attraction doesn't come from pleasing, it comes from presence. These men often end up deeply resentful, not just at women or society, but at themselves, for betraying their own instincts, for trading boldness for approval, for hiding their edges until they became invisible. But niceness isn't neutrality, it's a form of self-erasure. And when men erase themselves long enough, they don't become good. They become ghosts, quiet, drifting, hollow, until something snaps. That's why the path forward isn't more niceness. It's more integration, more honesty, more ownership, more fire. Masculinity isn't toxic, repression is. And until we allow men to be whole, strong, and sensitive, assertive, and compassionate, we'll keep breeding silent resentment in a culture that punishes the very traits it quietly relies on to survive. Niceness doesn't look like a threat. That's the danger. It hides in smiles, in silence, in the softly spoken, "It's fine," that echoes louder than a scream. But when someone wears the mask of politeness for too long, it doesn't just crack, it shatters. And when it does, the explosion is far worse than open conflict because it's been building for years. The most unsettling truth about nice guys is this: their violence is almost never random. It's repressed, calculated, born not from chaos, but from chronic self-abandonment, from the unrelenting effort to be good, approved, appropriate, until one day, the dam breaks. In 2007, psychologist Philip Zimbardo, the man behind the infamous Stanford prison experiment, published The Lucifer Effect. His conclusion? Evil isn't committed by monsters. It's committed by people who lost their identity, who conformed so deeply they became hollow vessels for cruelty. People who were once good, or at least wanted to be. This is where niceness becomes not just sad, but lethal. Because when a person builds their life on approval, they develop no tools for handling rejection, conflict, or loss. And without those tools, they snap. And it's not just individuals. Entire groups can be infected by this disease of performative goodness. Consider the cruelty of mobs, the passive acceptance of injustice, the moments when everyone in the room knows something's wrong but no one says a word. Because speaking up isn't nice, because standing out might cost them their seat at the table. So the silence continues, the cruelty escalates, and the blood is on everyone's hands. That's what de-individuation does. That's what conformity, suppression, and niceness produce when multiplied across a culture. Let's bring it into today. Social media now rewards the illusion of niceness. Algorithmic filters promote sanitized content. Conflict-avoidant influencers preach vague positivity while quietly deleting dissent. We're creating a generation of users who are emotionally polished, psychologically repressed, and spiritually exhausted. The irony? Behind the curtain, more people are angry than ever. More people are depressed, addicted, emotionally disconnected. But no one sees it, because it's all hidden behind likes, filters, and smiles. The cost of niceness is not just personal, it's collective. When no one is brave enough to be real, we lose the ability to hold each other accountable. We lose moral courage, and in its place, we get a culture that looks peaceful until it erupts. This is why nice is no longer a harmless adjective. It's a red flag. It tells you that someone might be hiding, and sometimes what they're hiding is a storm. So let's end where we began, with the mask. Being nice might win you approval. It might help you blend in, avoid conflict, or even feel morally superior. But underneath the surface, it costs more than it gives. It chips away at your truth, your boundaries, your voice. Because niceness without honesty isn't virtue, it's fear in disguise. And fear, when buried long enough, doesn't just disappear. It mutates into resentment, into disconnection, sometimes into destruction. The paradox of our time is that we reward people for being inoffensive while punishing them for being real. But realness is where change begins. Niceness just maintains the status quo. What the world actually needs is not more agreeable people, but more whole people. People who are kind when it matters, firm when it counts, and brave enough to speak what others are too afraid to say. People who've looked their shadow in the eye and decided not to flinch. And if this video cracks something open in you, don't stop here. Watch next. De-individuation. How the presence of others affects behavior. Because sometimes the scariest part of human nature isn't what we do alone. It's what we do when we stop feeling like ourselves.